Can any of the admirals really match up to Gear 5 Luffy? It feels like you can count how many people can put up a challenge on one hand. Many fans don't understand the impact that this transformation actually has on the world and just the story in general. And I'm not just talking about the Blank Century, I'm going to be telling you the truth about what this means for the future of One Piece and why this world or story will never be the same. If you're new around here, welcome to my channel. If you like One Piece, that's all I talk about, so I'd really appreciate if you subscribed. Now, let's get into it. So now that Luffy has achieved this form, it's safe to say that he's on the level of Kaido. So what's the greatest competition for him? I'm sure you're familiar with the three great powers, the Yonko, the Warlords, and the Marine Headquarters. They are said to be the greatest military forces on the ocean, so they should generally be the highest level of power in the world. But recently, the Warlords were disbanded, and the world's power balance is toppled, meaning all we have left is the Emperors and the Marines. It's not like the Warlords don't exist anymore, but since their job was to deal with other pirates, it just lowers the amount of enemies Luffy had, and that's not even considering he'd probably beat the majority of them, or the fact that some are his allies like Boa Hancock. So once Luffy surpasses the people above him, he'll have no competition. However, that's assuming the world will stay like this, but it's entirely possible for another great power to emerge so that more opponents seem challenging. I know a lot of people think the Revolutionary Army, but it's hard to put them above a single Yonko crew at the moment. I think there are three real contenders. 1. New pacifistas created by Vegapunk. 2. The Emperors of the Underworld. And 3. The Worst Generation. Now we have to look at the power of those groups and see if they're fit for the position, but how strong do they have to be? When looking at the original great powers, what do they have in common? After a bit of thought, you start to realize it's actually not too much. In fact, shouldn't the Warlords be considered part of the Marine Headquarters? I was thinking about it for a while and landed on only one real answer. They're all virtually untouchable. While some of them are technically each other's opponents, unless someone with great influence interferes like Blackbeard, all three of them, like I said, untouchable. Otherwise, Kaido or Doflamingo wouldn't be able to forcefully take over a country for 1 or 2 decades. Now let's look back at the contenders. Number 1, the pacifistas. The Warlords were already under the direct order of the government, but the pacifistas are by definition government slaves. From the new information and new performance we saw in the latest chapter, they might be the top contender here since they're able to rival the strength of literal Yonkos. However, they aren't untouchable since their lives are always in the hands of another power. Moving on to number 2, the Emperors of the Underworld. The Underworld itself is a system of connections which eludes the world government's control, but then again many members of CP0 are heavily involved in this area. They also lost their most influential figure Doflamingo and some of their biggest purchasers like Kaido. As a quote-unquote organization, they're not doing too well at the moment, and in terms of power, they're a mystery right now, but they do have a very similar position to the Warlords since they are against the government and working with them at the same time. And for the final contender, and what I personally think should be the third power, is the Worst Generation. It's been heavily implied that there will be a huge shift in power in the last 100 chapters, and there wouldn't be much of a shift in power if the pacifistas or the Underworld became a great power since they are either heavily affiliated with or directly under the Marines just like the Warlords. The Underworld is heavily infiltrated by Cypherpole, as we saw with Stussy and Lucci. However, the Worst Generation is heavily affiliated with the Yonko, meaning there would actually be a huge change in power rather than just replacing it with something of a copy. You can make an argument for X-Drake being a Marine, but unlike the Underworld, he's a single outlier while they're directly affiliated with the World Nobles through selling as well as CP0. Luffy was around the same level of strength as most of the Worst Generation in Sabaody, and many members have similar or higher bounties, but it was made clear that Luffy is stronger than Law, Kid, Apu, Hawkins, Drake, Zoro, Killer, and Beji. That already eliminates 70% of the competition, and that's if we give the rest of the members the benefit of the doubt. When taking in every possibility, I still think Gear 5 Luffy can take them all on. From the little information we do have about Gear 5, the fact he was able to turn one of the strongest and most feared people in the world into a jump rope is beyond me. The only true competition I see for the Straw Hats is Shanks, Blackbeard, Mihawk, and possibly Emu. The only other people I could think of are the older generations like maybe Garp or the old Rocks Pirate members like Shiki, but they're probably out of their prime. Except for Emu, since we have no info on them, once Luffy surpasses just one of the other competitors, he's already above all the others. Gear 5 was so powerful that we could never get another opponent that showed us a different level like Crocodile and Alabasta, Lucci and Enies Lobby, Kuma and Thriller Bark, Aokiji, Kaido, Big Mom. All these people gave Luffy a new goal. That goal has almost vanished. There are only a select few people that are at the same or higher level, but I imagine the difference between Luffy and his opponents now aren't anywhere near the difference between earlier opponents. For example, when the Straw Hats encountered Aokiji, he was able to single-handedly kill the crew right then and there, but of course he decided not to, and proceeded to not only freeze one of the crew members, but freeze like 50 miles of the ocean. Seeing those greater levels was what made the climaxes in One Piece feel so satisfying once those big fights were over, and it also made us look forward to the power that we'll see later. I bet something like Luffy versus Blackbeard would be pretty hype, but from what we've seen, their difference in power is so little that even if Luffy does win, it would never feel as satisfying as the win against Kaido or Crocodile. There's also another problem that might be bigger than anything I mentioned in the last few minutes, and that's the neglect of older forms. Now for those of you who've seen Dragon Ball, you know that with things like Ultra Instinct, there's no need for Super Saiyan anymore, and it's about to be the same with Gear 4th. There's a huge drawback to using Gear 4th, but as of now, Gear 5th is just more powerful in every way and there is no drawbacks. What's the point of not being able to use Haki after a few minutes of attacking at high strength when you could still use Haki after attacking with much more strength and abilities? Every gear used to have a specific use, but unless they introduce a negative, Gear 5th is just too overpowered, and that's why Gear 5th broke One Piece. That's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and while you're at it, check out this video.